Hi everyone, so I've just finished listening to Melanie C featuring Lisa Left Eye Lopez. I've listened to it for the fourth time today. Things will never be the same again. Things will never be the same again. And I realised that that is probably true. I feel like society is going to be almost recognisable in 10 years' time because of Agenda 2030. And what I'm realising is that I actually feel most people are going to rather enjoy it. Because if you're familiar with the work of Aldous Huxley in Brave New World, if you've even seen perhaps the adaptation of that on screen, they're just going around spraying soma over the people. So the people are placated by way of entertainment. Ultimately, they're things that they love. Okay, so whether it's sex, whether it's going to the feelies or the cinema, and whether it's just entertainment in general, right? These are the things that are preoccupying people's minds. If anyone ever actually realizes or questions the possibility that they are actually enslaved, which of course is the case in Brave New World, then suddenly this soma comes down. It just sprays them. It's just like they need to take their pills. It's like, oh my god, they're coming into awareness. What do we do? Let's sort of scramble to get this chemical into them, which they call soma, which, if you're familiar with the work of Plato, soma, the body is a tomb. The body, ultimately, is what's preoccupying the minds of the masses. And the body's needs, okay? So this is our lower centers. If you think of it, the chakras, the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, these needs and these psychological endeavors are what is ultimately driving society, not forwards, but along the same plane. Okay, we're stagnating. We're stagnant in comedy, in film, in entertainment, sports. And it's not that these things aren't valuable. Of course they are, but it's just that we don't have any foundation of freedom beneath those things, and therefore just year after year, decade after decade, it's the same thing. People are glued to their TVs. And of course, if you're familiar with the French philosopher Guy Debord, Society of the Spectacle, that's what it is. Everything's just become a spectacle, And right now, of course, the World Cup is what's distracting people. But it's just one thing to the next. And so this is the first port of call in terms of the New World Order. So, of course, people love things that they are naturally drawn towards. And, whether that's tennis or snooker or whatever field you're interested in academically. But what they've subversively removed from society is this higher order thinking that they've kept for themselves. And in doing so, that is maintaining this sort of social engineered condition of feeling that something is wrong, but not quite being able to put a finger on it. And so that's why we keep going year by year, engaged in these interests without actually ever questioning a deeper reality. And I often think of it as a frog in a glass analogy, where you sort of start heating the water up, and supposedly what happens is the frog ultimately just kills itself because it could jump out of the water at any point, but it doesn't realize that the temperature is actually being increased. But if you do it instantly, it'll jump right out. But if you keep doing it gradually, it will be like this totalitarian tiptoe that we're currently experiencing. And, this is the first port of call, of course. Keep the people placated, appeased, and distracted with whatever, any means of doing that. Of course, politics is one of the best ways of capturing the minds of adults. If they're not interested in sport, if they're not interested in comedy or general entertainment films, then politics is going to get them. The newspapers, the headlines, and just getting wrapped up in that, which is just bread and circuses, all of it, unfortunately. But of course, if we have that nature, it's what we are drawn towards, and we don't see any means of progression because it's sort of died within us. And it's that rebellion that has been sort of removed and excavated from our minds. And as George Orwell said, until they become conscious, they will never rebel. And until after they have rebelled, they cannot become conscious. So it's this weird situation where consciousness has become an impossibility for most because of these distractions. And so once we get past this sort of tier one, level, for those who are still have the air of rebellion, those annoying spiritual souls out there who are perhaps, more privy to the means of control that we're currently experiencing, they have all sorts of tools and techniques that they're going to employ in society. Of course, the social crediting system, surveillance capitalism in general, and the use of the Internet of Things, which are all connected to a system of control that we might think of as an open air AI prison of sorts. And again, how will we realize that we are enslaved when it's so normalized to the extent where you cannot think of anything outside of the norm? It's like the Adam Curtis documentary Hypernormalization, if you remember that, in which he was discussing the Soviet Union and some of the rebellion that was sort of emerging at the time, but it took a long time because people knew there was something wrong with the system, but they had no imagination to think of any other way. So they sort of pretended that it was functional, that everything was working accordingly. And it became a sort of self-fulfilling prophecy. So they were sort of sleepwalking unconsciously towards their own gulags. And I feel like that is sort of what's happening now. But of course, they're not going to make it so overt. It's not going to be anything like in the past where it's just boot in your face. It's going to be instead manipulated so that we actually desire the things that they know that we want. And then behind the scenes, though, the walls are closing in on us. And, censorship is becoming more and more apparent. The connection between our bank accounts and social crediting scores is getting closer and closer by way of what is going to be called cryptocurrency technologies, where everything is on this public distributed ledger, which is essentially sort of a government-owned awareness of all transactions that are taking place. You can be debanked, you can be deplatformed already. These things are already happening. In 2020, 2021, we saw that happening all the time. And so for the most part, people will just, like already what is already happening, just sort of not care because they don't see, there's no alarm bells ringing because they cannot see what's coming, and they wouldn't care even if they did because they're so preoccupied with everything. Their interests are closer to home. But once you have this spiritual awakening and your interests become more expansive, you can see it very clearly that we're all heading towards this waterfall, and no one's willing to steer the ship in a different direction. And so if you're born with a spiritual immune system, like Henri Bergson said, sooner or later give rejection to the illusory worldview grafted upon them from birth through social conditioning. They begin sensing that something is amiss and start looking for answers. Inner knowledge and anomalous outer experiences show them a side of reality others are oblivious to. And so begins their journey of awakening. Each step of the journey is made by following the heart instead of following the crowd, and by choosing knowledge over the veils of ignorance. So grafted upon them from birth through social conditioning, social engineering. So this is where the evil is. It's this nefarious agenda to get people at a very young age. Like if you're familiar with the famous Jesuit phrase, something along the lines of, show me a man till the age of 7, or show me a boy to the age of 7 and I'll show you the man. Very contentious indeed. But anyway, the time has come for us to awaken to a high level of consciousness. I'd like to invite you to newearth.land, where we can actually participate in a new social model that operates in conjunction, in parallel to the one that we've currently got, and affords us the freedom that we actually want, because everything that we've just listed, there's nothing wrong with the entertainment, there's nothing wrong with the comedy, there's nothing wrong with these seemingly surface level activities that we're all participating in and all thoroughly enjoy. Ultimately, it's play, isn't it? We all enjoy play. But if we don't have true freedom, and if instead we are actually ultimately being controlled, again, it's this McDonald's analogy that I use, where you're already inside a social model and that can't be questioned, but your options within that social model can be questioned and can be selected. Just like if you're in a bad restaurant and you can choose anything in that menu, but you cannot think about the possibility of going to another restaurant. So you're stuck choosing between cheeseburgers, apple turnovers, Big Macs, and fries, some McNuggets maybe. So that, in a sense, is really the video. We've got to be very careful. We need to somehow evolve consciousness at this time, because if not, we're going to be sleepwalk like zombies into these chains of gold, and there won't be even a consideration of rebellion against what's happening behind the scenes. Only when it becomes obvious to us, it will be too late. And that will be pretty much what they're showing us in the Matrix, okay? So this will be a total technocracy. There will be no way of creating videos that have any ounce of rebellion weighted to it. And it will be an extension of what we experienced in 2020, 2021. So we need to be careful. We need to stay vigilant. and we need to realise that we are the only people that can actually bring ourselves out of this situation and create a true alternative for everyone. So thank you for watching. Catch you in the next video.